Good evening. My name is Matthew Lara, and the title of my project, my research project, is Tom's Does More Harm Than Good, referring to Tom's shoes. Tom's is a one-to-one company that was started in May of 2006 by a guy named Blake Mikowski. The basis of the company is one-to-one, which means that whenever a consumer buys a pair of Tom's shoes, they will donate a pair of shoes to a child or a person in need in another country, usually a third world country. The hypothesis for this research project is Tom's is not solving any issues in the long term with the cycle of poverty, or even in just example or any in the communities that they're working in. A quote that was used in the research project was a guy by the last name of Davenport, and it was first the Tom's buy one, give one model does not actually solve a social problem. Rather, the charitable act of donating a free pair of shoes serves as little more than a short-term fix in a system in need of a long-term, multifaceted economic development, health, sanitation, and education solutions. Basically, that's a longer version of the hypothesis that what they're doing is not making any substantial impact into the community. It's just a short-term band-aid fix. Tom's claims that they have given over 50 million pairs of shoes away to people in need. The picture on the right shows some kiddos who have received a pair of shoes from Tom's. They are obviously happy, which is the goal of what they're doing. However, we've all heard that old saying of if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. If you teach him how to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. And basically, what the Tom's is doing is they're just giving somebody a fish. They're creating a short-term fix and not making any substantial progress or change in the communities that they're serving. Like I mentioned before, Tom's has given away over 50 million pairs of shoes in the communities that they're serving. They did not break down how many they give it around each year. So during the research, it was kind of assumed that over the past 9 years, it has steadily increased. Based on a 15 million pairs of shoes community, the sample size would be 4,147, with a mean of 5,555,555.56, standard deviation of 2,297,341.459, and a sample variance of 5 trillion. Basically, with a huge community, 50 million people who have received his shoes, you need an equally large amount of people to interview and question as a sample group to get a better representation of what is happening. The research design we decided to use a quantitative design. This was done because it's easier to show the discrepancy between what the goal is and what is actually happening. Also, it was done because it's easier for people, consumers, or the management team to digest what is actually happening than if you use a qualitative research design. There's some pros and cons, of course, with using this design. The first pro was that there's already some research available for this type of problem that can be used throughout the paper rather than the research team having to go create brand new data. Because using this design makes this information easier to track if it had to be tested in a real life scenario. Another pro is that the secondary data that is available already has already been completed, and it's easier for the researchers to be able to identify reputable resources to use throughout the paper to ensure that all the information that is being said can be backed up by research. However, there's some cons for this research design, and it's that some research has already been completed on this topic, but there's not enough to conclusively decide that if Tom's is effective or beneficial in the communities that they're serving. Another con to that using quantitative research is the researcher has to look at numbers, and simply that's it. There's no context surrounding those numbers. We are not able to contact the original research team that came up with those results, or even the people that they were interviewed, to possibly have follow-up interviews, or more conversations to better understand why they made the decisions that they did. When writing a research paper, you have to identify some ethical considerations. The first ethical consideration that was listed was that should Toms be allowed to continue to claim success if they're not actually making long-term changes in the way people live in the countries or communities that they're doing work in. So there's pros and cons to the ethical considerations. A pro for this is that the data that will be available will be able to show if they're making any significant changes, if they're doing, or if they're doing more harm than good. However, a con, which I mentioned above or previously, is that there's not enough research to definitively claim if Toms can do it or not. Another ethical consideration when writing this is that I am a lover of Toms. I have several pairs of Toms. A pro to this is because I'm so close to Toms, I had to take extra consideration and care to not be biased when writing the research and doing the research, to ensure that it was given in a way that was factual and not opinionated. A con to this is that it could be kind of difficult to find data that backs up what is actually happening and not what we would want to be happening. When we looked at the data after the interviewing the 10 people, we have to do some hypothesis testing. The first thing you do when hypothesis testing, is to look at the null hypothesis. So in this case, the hypothesis was that Toms is not making any substantial long-term changes in the communities they're serving. So therefore, the null hypothesis would be that they are making long-term changes and impacts in the communities that they're serving. When we look at the 10 people that were questioned and the overall data, it shows that they believe that Toms is making substantial impact and that Toms is changing the way they're living their lives. However, we can't go on just 10 people that were questioned. That's less than 1% of the sample size of 4,147 people needed to be able to actually judge and justify the people or the results that Toms is claiming they have made. Excuse me. The findings of this, like I mentioned before, is that the hypothesis would be disproven if we looked at just the 10 people that were questioned. However, the sample size is not representative of the full community of 50 million people to be able to make a factual and justified decision on their impact. We need to be able to create more, or we need to be able to interview more people, as well as do a longer study over time to see if they're making any changes. One reason that the data can't be trusted with just those 10 people, there's questions that conflict with each other that don't make a lot of sense. We'll get into that here in a second. One question that disproves our hypothesis was, do you feel Toms has affected your life in a positive way? This question was 50-50. 5 said yes, 5 said no. They were coded 1 if they said yes, coded 2 they said no. So this one was kind of on the fence. But if you get to the next question of did receiving the shoes encourage you to better your life? 6 out of the 10 people said yes. Having these shoes encouraged them to better their lives, which could mean they went to school, they got a job, they're increasing their quality of life for their family. 4 people said no, it did not encourage their life. This is a question that contradicts what what the questions previously were stating. And it was, do you believe Tom's is doing more harm to the community rather than good? Same coding, 1 if they thought yes, 2 if they thought no. So 7 or 70% of the people that were interviewed believe yes, Tom's is doing more harm to the community rather than they are doing any good. Based on this, it's kind of hard to make a full factual decision and judgment on if Tom's is making any substantial impact because the data that we have simply conflicts. If we use the full sample size of 4,147, you'd be able to make a better, more informed decision on if they're making any impact in the community. Because over time and over the amount of people you interview, the data will even out and be able to show you if more people believe they're making a substantial impact or if more people believe they're not, or if it's equal. So in conclusion, the more data is needed to make a better decision on what is happening. Like I said a few times, 10 people is not enough to make a factual judgment or decision on a company and their impact that they're making. Also, the 10 people that were interviewed is showing inconsistent data, and it makes it difficult to believe what is happening. If you had a full sample size, it'd be easier to make a better decision on Tom's. Thank you.